Hello, Adam's child. Welcome to this week's sermon, all about a fascinating and rather puzzling creature, or should I say, group of creatures, maybe, known as Mirelurks. Let's crank up the rads and get the pot boiling as we see what Mirelurks are, what inspired their design, and how their lore has been expanded and changed game to game through the series. Although Mirelurks feel like a mainstay for many Fallout fans, they are a rather recent addition to the series, first debuting in Fallout 3 when Todd Howard got his grubby little mitts all over the franchise. They won't be the first creature you encounter when you escape Vault 101 and take in your first look at the desolate capital wasteland, but Mirelurks will make an impression because of their unique look and surprising diversity, as they can appear as walking crabs or strangely human-like marine monsters. Although even the most dangerous kinds of Mirelurks are not endgame creatures, they are known amongst the wasters of the capital region as being some of the best meat that one can get their hands on. An entire small community set up shop in the numerous halls and tunnels of the Anchorage Memorial, where they had herded a whole cast of Mirelurks. And yes, that is what a group of crabs is called. Maybe we should make up a new word for a group of Mirelurks. Into the lower levels where they could be raised for their meat. This community would select a lurk for slaughter, butcher them up, and place some meat in refrigerators to be traded, but also to be made into some Mirelurk crab cakes. These Mirelurk cakes required, well, meat of course, Mirelurk eggs, stale and crumbled bread, mayonnaise, which must be hard to come by because we don't ever find any laying around in the wastes, some scrub plant, salt, and then oil for frying up in the pan, which is a pretty typical recipe for real-world crab cakes. This small community was doing really well for itself actually. Business was booming, and their little farming plan was actually working, until a rival unknown trader was sick of their success and hired mercenaries to disrupt their operation. Disrupt they did as the mercenaries released the Mirelurks from their containment, which ran around and massacred everyone. Although whether this was according to the mercenaries' plan or a tragic result of faulty judgment, we can't be 100% sure. Just across the river from this failed Mirelurk venture is a lone old woman, Grandma Sparkle. The rest of her family are on a perpetual hunt for them delicious Mirelurks, which is very clearly her favorite kind of meat. But if all this talk of delicious Mirelurk meat is making you want to go melt some butter, just hold on, because the Enclave, well, they think Mirelurk meat is disgusting. To be fair, they think anything trudging through the radioactive wasteland is disgusting, humans included, but one of the few things the Enclave does do right is that they are eager to put a microscope to all the new wasteland creatures. In an Enclave-filled research terminal, there is an entry specifically about Mirelurks, and based on what we read, it seems they are referring to the lower threat crab-like kind of Mirelurk, because they have concluded after DNA and RNA analysis that the crabby Mirelurks have two primary descendants, Limulus polyphemus, otherwise known as the horseshoe crab, and Caliconectes sapidus, the blue crab. They can't reconcile the presence of two vastly different kinds of crabs together that can't reproduce with each other naturally. And you know, I am inclined to agree. Both horseshoe crabs and blue crabs can be found naturally in Chesapeake Bay, and looking at the base Mirelurk, we can definitely see physiological similarities. The large hard shell or carapace that offers the bulk of protection to our crab brothers is very similarly shaped to a horseshoe crab, and they even have a little tail that hangs off, again reminiscent of a horseshoe crab. The blue crab similarities are a lot less obvious. The coloring, the pincers, and the shape of the face are all roughly similar and are definitely not from a horseshoe crab. Mirelurk hunters are a more deadly variant, a step up from the basic Mirelurk we were just looking at. They are brown, more like horseshoe crabs. They are taller and spinier, while also having much larger claws. A very interesting addition are the smaller appendages that are above the two main pincers. These tiny little things don't seem like they would be particularly useful. After all, if a normal Mirelurk can get along just fine without them, then what even is the point? These limbs would be classified as chelicerae, which specialize in helping the Mirelurk feed, which we can observe during the hunter's idle animation. So far, Mirelurks have been pretty straightforward. Large mutated crab creatures that run around snapping up things in their claws and communicating with each other with audible, rapid clicking. But things get so much more complex when we take a look at the top of the Mirelurk hierarchy, the human-like Mirelurk King. Just look at these guys. There's no reason to think they are in any way, shape, or form related to Mirelurks and Mirelurk hunters, but their connection is deeper than just sharing the name Mirelurk. Kings and the rest of them are commonly found living together, peacefully and cohabitating perfectly fine, which may be the entire reason that people refer to them collectively as Mirelurks. The only real similarities with kings and the other lurks are their blue and white coloring that is very close to the normal Mirelurk, and they can be heard doing the same clicking noises, but that is really as deep as it goes. With hands and feet equipped with 4 long claws, spines down the back, and fins on each appendage, they stand upright on 2 legs and have a strange face that is almost turtle-like with 2 separate sets of teeth. The ones in front are extremely sharp, and the ones in the back are almost like one continuous tooth on top and bottom that look perfectly suited for grinding. These Voldemort-looking freaks have a 14-pack and a tail just big enough to hide their shame. They look and act quite differently from their crab brothers, and this really becomes clear when we look at how they fight. All Mirelurks are incredibly territorial, and treading on their territory near water, in subway tunnels, vaults, or caves will instantly send them into a frenzy. Normal Mirelurks and Mirelurk hunters will charge towards you, lowering their head to protect their most vulnerable spot, their face. Their shells will block over half of incoming damage, and apparently they have instinctually learned to hide their squishy little face when charging enemies. When they get close, they will leap forward, doing a headbutt type attack, knocking their target back several feet before rapidly attacking with their large pincers. Mirelurk hunters have an additional attack where they do an aggressive chest bump, dealing damage with their smaller feeding appendages, and if you give them a chance, they will often hit you with the good old 1, 2, 3 punch. The kings, on the other hand, while they will attack when up close and personal, swiping with their clawed hands, they are the only variant with a ranged attack, some sort of bizarre, echoing sonic attack that is visualized as a blue pulse. This sonic attack bypasses all damage resistance from wearing armor, and when this pulse strikes you in the head, it will instantly cripple. Don't let their slow shambling fool you though, because when they charge to attack, they are bloody fast. Mirelurks are also resistant to knockdown effects from weapons like missile launchers and Gauss rifles. All that happens is they get knocked back a few feet. So don't expect anything less than a mini nuke to knock them on their butts. To effectively fight them, target the face of the crab Mirelurks. Throw down some frag mines in their path, or at the very least, cripple their legs to slow them down. And for the love of Atom, do not waste your time attacking their shell. Use VATS if you have to in order to target their face, which is rather small, but they will sometimes heavily expose it right after a headbutt attack. Mirelurk kings don't have a weakness as exploitable as the Mirelurk face, but the head is always a safe bet. Mirelurks will chase you to the ends of the earth, but if you run into the water, which sounds like a bad idea because that's where they live, they will unsurprisingly chase you, but they will not attack you while swimming. Yes, the one aquatic enemy type in the whole game cannot swim and attack at the same time. Although, to be fair, neither can we. So yeah, you can just run into the water for safety, while you'll just end up floating there, staring at each other awkwardly. So, you guys come here often? They are adept swimmers. The crabby Mirelurks swim dragging their claws, and the kings swim with lateral strokes like a dolphin or mermaid. And those guys are fast, by far the fastest swimming creature in the whole game. We are left to wonder then, how and why Mirelurk kings look and act so differently from the other types. Is this a case of specialized roles, leading to very different morphologies and body plans? Similar to how different kinds of bees, ants, and termites will look radically different depending on their role as queens, drones, guards, and workers? Or Are Mirelurk kings entirely different species that have mutated to work symbiotically with a weaker but more numerous crab species? There are a few details that could support either theory, although I think the evidence is strongest for the latter theory that they are separate species. One piece of evidence is the king's exclusive use of the sonic pulse attack. Quite unusual among all wasteland creatures, but Mirelurks are also very sensitive to sound. In Vault 92, a devious experiment involving the use of white noise and its effects on the vault dwellers was conducted with disastrous results, and long after the dwellers went insane and died, Mirelurks somehow infiltrated the vault and called it their home. If you, the Lone Wanderer, enter this vault and find the vault's speaker controls playing some white noise that was programmed for use against the vault dwellers, will actually kill every single one of them. For some reason, they are so sensitive to certain sounds that the right frequencies can just kill them outright. So could the Mirelurk kings assert dominance and an element of control over the other Mirelurks using these sonic abilities. Additionally, crabs in the real world generally have blue or bluish-gray colored blood, while the Mirelurks have a greenish blood. Perhaps this is due to radioactivity buildup, but this is important because Mirelurk kings have red blood. It is hard to imagine a scenario where two members of the same exact species, even if they do look different, have completely different kinds of blood. Moira Brown, the ditzy owner of Craterside Supply at Megaton, is convinced that Mirelurks live together in a somewhat advanced society with high intelligence and a hierarchy. She wonders if they have a leader, a king, a priest, or maybe even a community center, and will gather data from an electronic sensor that she wants us to place in a Mirelurk egg pod. We don't get to learn what data she ends up collecting, and by all appearances, it seems as though no such advanced community exists. However, this may not have always been the case when Bethesda was designing the creatures. We have a lot of good concept art from the development of Fallout 3, and in multiple places, we see Mirelurk kings wielding weapons, a bone club, a large wooden staff, and even a net decorated with human skulls. Notes on the concept art mention the use of tridents and baling wire whips, in addition to the bones, the staves, and nets, which would have meant that Mirelurk kings would have been the only wasteland creature in Fallout 3 that approached human intelligence. And it would have been pretty crazy to have a whole other humanoid species building intelligent communities to contend with. But, personally, I am glad that they didn't end up going that route. All of this is simply to say that there are those within the wasteland that suspect Mirelurks might have advanced communities. Concept art seems to float this idea by showing how smart they could have been as well. In contrast to the theory that Mirelurk kings are their own species and exert control over Krabby Patties, the theory that kings could be the same species, just playing a specialized role that caused it to look drastically different, has a little bit of support. Moira Brown, yes, her again, posits this exact theory when we speak with her, and one of the items that can consistently be found on a Mirelurk king's body is soft shell Mirelurk meat, the same kind of meat that can be found on Mirelurk hunters. With how different they appear from the crab Mirelurks, with a weirdly human but also turtle-like face, it is strange that they would have the same kind of tissue, but if they are the same species, then it would make more sense. The coloration between the base Mirelurk and the Mirelurk king is also very close, the same shades of white and blue, which could be evidence in favor of them being the same species. On the topic of Mirelurk meat, since it is regarded as a wasteland delicacy, you would naturally be curious to find out what all the hubbub is about. Mirelurk meat is represented in-game as a giant pincer, which makes sense since that is generally the meatiest part of a crab, unless you're a Mirelurk king that has no pincers, and it restores 20 HP but administers 2 rads. Still, this makes it more beneficial than nearly all pre-war food that you can find, and let's be honest, it's not bad for a man-eating crab monster that spends most of its time stewing in radioactive water. Mirelurk meat is found on Mirelurks and Mirelurk hunters, and sometimes in Mirelurk egg pods. Soft-shell Mirelurk meat is the best kind though. always found on hunters, and sometimes on kings, and sometimes in egg pods. It looks identical to normal meat, but heals for 30 HP and again 2 rads, making it the single most health-restoring food item in Fallout 3. Hatchling Mirelurk meat can only be found in the pods themselves, and it is the least nutritious of all the possible meat types, healing only 4 HP. The eggs themselves are found where large groups of Mirelurks set up shop, like in Vault 92, the Broken Bow of Rivet City, or the Anchorage Memorial, and how they look and where they are found are interesting because they are unlike anything we see amongst crustaceans, and especially crabs. These oval, brown eggs are quite large when compared to a Mirelurk and are always found stuck together in some sort of bluish-green substance. This same substance can be found holding piles of bones and other remains together. But everything about these eggs is so different from what we would expect from a species descended from crabs. Crab eggs are tiny. They are very numerous, often a bright orange color, and in most cases carried by the female on her body rather than deposited somewhere on the ground. How or why they mutated to lay these large brown eggs stuck in this blue mystery substance can't be known. But it's interesting to contrast that with the real-world horseshoe and blue crab eggs. Now that's not the last of the delicious kinds of Mirelurk meats that we can find. There is one ultra-exclusive, rare, and blue type of Mirelurk meat. Nucalurks can be found at the Nuka-Cola plant, where they have set up shop and adopted a glowing blue aura, all thanks to living in, around, and perhaps consuming Nuka-Cola Quantum with its electric blue radioactive contents. These Nucalurks, despite having an awesome name, are critically endangered, as there are only around 10 specimens in the factory, and once they are killed, they don't respawn. That means the Nucalurk meat, which has the Mirelurk Cake Pip-Boy icon for some reason, gives 20 hit points, 4 rads, so it's a little more radioactive, but also 10 extra action points for 4 minutes. And that specific detail is all thanks to a little pep from the Nuka Quantum. Nucalurks aren't the only interesting variant though. If we hop on a steamboat and cruise on down to Point Lookout, we find a type of Mirelurk that has adapted to this exceptionally swampy and dangerous part of the wasteland. Point Lookout Mirelurks, sometimes referred to as swamp lurks, look remarkably similar to Mirelurk hunters. They are just missing the extra small appendages, and they have a greener hue to help them blend in with the marshy swamps. The real star of this show, though, is what are called swamp lurks in-game, but have become known as swamp lurk queens, which look remarkably similar to Mirelurk kings, with very notable exceptions. They are once again more green to blend in, but the swamp lurk's eyes glow yellow, betraying its position in the dark, but looking undeniably cool. And hey, maybe it tries to lure in prey with that at night. Its ranged attack is no longer a sonic blast, but some sort of caustic or acidic spit, similar to centaurs. These small differences cause one to wonder why and how these differences even developed. Does the swamp lurk queen attract prey with its eyes? Did it lose the sonic pulse ability and replace it with an acid attack? Or did the swamp lurks and Mirelurks diverge at some point and evolve on separate paths? Oh yeah, also, look at these guys spaz out in the water. With so many kinds of Mirelurks, how do they all stack up against each other? Starting with the weakest, we have the base Mirelurk, the Point Lookout Mirelurk, or Swamp Lurk, and the Nucalurks, which are all identical stat-wise, differing primarily in their appearance. With low perception and lowish attack, as long as you don't waste shots on their tough shell, which blocks half of all incoming damage, these won't be a challenge, except at very early levels. Mirelurk hunters are the next most dangerous with higher perception, over 50% more health, and almost double the damage. They require a lot more preparation and more powerful weapons to overcome. Mirelurk kings are the second most lethal variant with a lot more health than the hunters and more perception, although their melee damage is not as powerful. Their sonic attack can make up for it though, especially because of the ease of landing critical shots on the head with shocking accuracy. The Swamp Lurk Queen has to take the cake here though at the top of the list, because not only is she nearly double the king's health, she has higher perception, the highest melee damage of any type, and can inflict an additional 100 points of damage on a successful acid strike, making the queen the undeniable top of the Mirelurk chain. Now for my absolute favorite part, which are all the great random details, figuring out the real-world inspirations for the designs, and exploring all the Mirelurk variants that we almost had, that we can see in the concept art. After completing the main storyline and getting Project Purity back online and pumping out non-irradiated water that maybe has some FEV in it, who knows, the Mirelurks that called the pool nearby their home will be found dead or dying. One Brotherhood initiate will remark that the new purified water is killing the Mirelurks, meaning that they have adapted so well to the irradiated post-war world that purified water is now lethal to them. This leads me to wonder, with the success of Project Purity, is the eventual fate of all Capital Wasteland Mirelurks to die off? Or will life find a way and some variants will thrive in the new clean water? For some reason, Mirelurk Kings and Swamplurk Queens can be pickpocketed by the player. Well, kind of, because their inventories are always empty as we are rummaging around in their prison pocket, and if we try to reverse pickpocket explosives into their inventory, we are always caught, so it is impossible to do so. The Enclave in their research terminal decided to give Mirelurks, or at least the crabby kind, the scientific name Scylla serrata horrendus, and this is interesting for several reasons. The first is that Scylla serrata is the scientific name for an existing real-world crab, which is a mud crab that is native to parts of Africa, which is very far away, and they are very un-Mirelurk-like. The second interesting part about this, though, is that it isn't the first time this name was proposed as a scientific name for Mirelurks. Indeed, during the very same Wasteland Survival Guide with Moira Brown, where she has us putting the observer in their nests, if we have a high enough intelligence, we get the chance to tell her that we think they descend from local crabs, and we would call them Scylla serrata horrendus. The exact same name. Usually this quest is done much earlier in the game, since Megaton is generally the first big settlement we encounter, and the Enclave Research Terminal was added with the Brotherhood of Steel DLC, and will only appear after the end of the main storyline. So the question is this a case of great minds think alike, or were the Enclave somehow privy to this information? Is Moira an Enclave informer? I knew there was something off about her. Both base level Mirelurks and Mirelurk Kings have very strong real-world inspirations, although one comes from a more obscure place. Firstly, Mirelurk Kings draw heavy inspiration from what is known as Gillman, or the creature from the Black Lagoon. This monster flick from the 1950s starred an upright, bipedal, aquatic man monster that certainly shares similarities with the gills on the side of the neck, claws, rows of abs, and fins on the arms and legs. It has been said that the concept artists drew heavy inspiration from 50s monster suits, although it was never explicitly said that this was the inspiration. Now, the base crab-like Mirelurk comes from a more unexpected place, but the similarities are too strong to deny. A company that makes fantasy and sci-fi miniatures for roleplay or other tabletop games made a creature called a Sponk that is a near dead match for what we see in-game. Some of the details don't line up perfectly, like the number of toes, the exact shape of the head, the lack of a tail, etc., but as a whole, this is a dead ringer as far as I'm concerned. The variety of Mirelurk creatures in the concept art is quite astonishing. There are several catfish-inspired Mirelurks, all upright, bipedal, and freaking ripped, of course. One disturbing turtle mudskipper thing. I don't rightfully know what this was supposed to be. A taller and skinnier, more lobster-esque variant that is also portrayed holding a trident and was perhaps an earlier version of the Mirelurk King. Speaking of the kings, there are some very turtle-like concepts, a far stronger resemblance than what we see in-game, which have a vague similarity, and even spikier versions of Mirelurks than anything that we have ever seen. A very close version to what we see in-game is noted as having an opposable claw for gripping primitive weapons, like a machine gun. Again, it's obvious that making Mirelurks a much more intelligent group was an early concept. There are also some ideas in here that we don't see in Fallout 3 that we will see in a later game, but I don't want to spoil the surprise here. Mirelurks don't exist on the West Coast so far as we are aware at this point in time, although what we could describe as an extremely close relative has made the Colorado River, Lake Mead, and some caverns nearby its home. All the way over in the Mojave, an area famous for its vibrant marine wildlife, a creature that looks remarkably similar to the East Coast Mirelurk king has established itself and has been dubbed the Lake Lurk. Lake Lurks have green and yellow coloration with orange colored eyes and have the same attack set as Mirelurk kings, slashing away with clawed hands up close and firing sonic pulses from afar. There is only one variation though, the Lake Lurk king, which looks identical except for its menacing glowing eyes. Lake Lurk kings are very uncommon. In fact, seemingly only one exists in the Lake Lurk infested Camp Guardian caves. All the way back in the depths of the cave, where they keep their clutches of eggs, the Lake Lurk king resides, standing guard, seemingly protecting the next generation. The interesting thing about the Lake Lurk king, however, is that if it is killed, all the other Lake Lurks in the cave will completely frenzy to the point that they attack each other. The king seems to keep the peace, or perhaps the lack of a king has made a power vacuum and made all the other Lake Lurks start fighting to vie over the newly vacant position atop their hierarchy. Either way, its presence is definitely important to the Lake Lurk groups, and the lack of one seems to cause a great disturbance. A small group of NCR soldiers at Camp Guardian met awful fates as they were sitting in their camp, being all bureaucratic as the NCR do, when a group of Lake Lurks emerged from a nearby cave and started dragging them screaming into the depths of the cave. All but one of them died, Private Halford. All the other bodies were drugged to the center of the cave where the king and the clutches of eggs can be found, either to give the king the first pick of the food, or perhaps to have food ready for any potential new hatchlings. While most Lake Lurks are found on the water, near the water, or in caves and mines, immediately adjacent to the river or lake, there is one location that is almost as far away as you can get and still be on the New Vegas map. The Ruby Hill Mine, all the way in the West Mountains for some reason, has a large colony of Lake Lurks. If we assume Lake Lurks came from, well, the lake, how did some of them traverse such a huge distance to get to this mine? I would love to hear some theories, because it would seem most likely that they were purposefully or accidentally brought to the mine. Could this have been another failed attempt to farm lurks for meat like we saw in the capital region? We know that they are extremely protective of their egg clutches, which look exactly as they do in Fallout 3, but now we can actually loot the eggs themselves. For whatever reason though, eggs will change from their coloration of brown and white and easily recognizable egg shape to a long, small, yellowish egg that is ribbed for your pleasure. This is actually the model used for Cazador eggs, and this sudden transformation is yet more evidence that proves that Fallout New Vegas is the superior game. Eggs heal a meager 5 hit points and dose for 3 rads, and can't be used in any recipes, so only choke one of these things down if you have to, because they don't do much and they're not worth much. Lake Lurk meat, on the other hand, will heal for 20 HP and is less radioactive for only 1 rad in total. If you can manage to collect all the ingredients for the Wasteland Omelette, which includes Blamco mac and cheese, crunchy mute fruit, a Deathclaw egg, and Lake Lurk meat, you can heal for 240 HP or sell it for a healthy 100 caps. Obviously, the Lake Lurk King is far more powerful than a base Lake Lurk, with only more perception, double the health, and almost double the melee damage, and unlike many other creatures, there's no legendary Lake Lurk. But a cut alpha male Lake Lurk would have done a bit more damage and have more health than even a Lake Lurk King. And I for one would welcome any Lake Lurk diversity and extra lore because, honestly, it's a little scant. The single biggest expansion, addition, and evolution to Mirelurks and their lore come from 2015's Fallout 4. Oh boy, where to begin? I guess we can start with the most immediate and obvious change for returning fans. The Mirelurks that we knew from Fallout 3 look very radically different, and we even get new kinds of Mirelurk to contend with. The smallest changes were made to the bog standard Mirelurk, which is still protected by a big hard carapace, and it walks upright, attacking with 2 very large pincers, but it's no longer bipedal, rather scurrying around on several legs. This design actually probably came from this Fallout 3 concept, the one lone drawing that shows a Mirelurk not walking on 2 legs. Mirelurk hunters are completely unrecognizable, whereas before they were a slightly modified base Mirelurk, they now appear to be a mutated form of an entirely different animal. This lobster-like hunter is incredibly aggressive, fast, and now has a ranged spit attack to top it all off. Mirelurk kings are also essentially unrecognizable. No longer standing tall on 2 feet, they will walk sometimes hunched on 2 legs, but they will charge on all 4s. They are not even really humanoid anymore, rather some vicious clawed amphibian type creature, although it retains its ranged sonic pulse attack and will rarely demonstrate a cloaking ability. In addition, we have both the smallest Mirelurk we've ever seen and by far the largest one as well. Fallout 4 was really going hard with their Mirelurks. Mirelurk hatchlings and spawn are the tiniest kinds that can be found, although to be honest, they're not like that tiny. These things would still make a snack out of your cat. Hatchlings are a bit smaller and are seen erupting from eggs and will immediately set on the nearest target because they were born set to kill. Mirelurk queens are the new biggest bad introduced in Fallout 4, and these absolutely enormous Mirelurks act as bosses, usually lying in wait until all surrounding Mirelurks or Mirelurk eggs have been destroyed. We will look at these more closely, but what could account for the drastic changes and explosion in Mirelurk diversity? Although it has been assumed up to this point that the amazing abilities of radiation were responsible for the extensively mutated Mirelurks, Fallout 4 actually gives us some confirmation. A research society known as the Nahant Oceanological Society was dedicated to researching radioactivity and its effects on marine life, as well as providing the proof necessary to go after the big corporations that were suspected of being these polluters. Despite the fact that they had tried to raise the alarm about surging crab and lobster sizes in local populations, the local news spun the story in a positive way, telling everyone that their favorite seafood was getting bigger. What's not to like? Their studies found increasing radioactivity and toxicity in cod and barnacles as well, with an average month-over-month increase of 34% in radioactivity. But no one, except the society itself, seemed to care. At the present day, the society's former building is inhabited by Mirelurks, as is the shore outside, and Lake Quannapoit, which they had also tested and found incredibly toxic and irradiated. So crab and lobster sizes were already increasing in the years before the Great War. It is no surprise then that the growth would have continued, along with the innumerable large and small mutations that led to the aquatic monstrosities we see in game. The normal Mirelurk definitely takes many physical cues from the horseshoe crab when looking at its carapace shape, although its face, large pincers, and oversized main locomotive legs seem to be from a different kind of crab entirely, possibly a blue crab like their brethren in the Capital Wasteland. Their tiny appendages just below their face are used to feed, which we can sometimes observe as they appear to be scavengers, feasting on the numerous beached and dead dolphins we observe on the coasts of the Commonwealth. Mirelurk hatchlings and Mirelurk spawn scuttle along the ground with a large dome-shaped shell, but no prominent pincers, although some of their legs appear to have some wicked little claws. They appear most similar to the Pacific sand crab, sometimes called a mole crab, which are sand-burrowing crustaceans on the western coasts of North and South America. So how did they end up all the way on the East Coast? Perhaps this is simply a case of convergent evolution. Mirelurk hunters resemble a lobster or crayfish, and this is confirmed in the Art of Fallout 4 book. Like most Mirelurks, certain features of their body, which are normally parallel to the ground, are now perpendicular, like how their face and their compound eyes now sit upright, and their pincers are rather small for their body size when we compare a Mirelurk hunter to an actual lobster. Perhaps this change to be more upright, so to speak, occurred as Mirelurks evolved to be terrestrial predators and scavengers, needing to look for food rather than just shambling about the seabed. Mirelurk kings are much smaller than before and a lot quicker. While their body is a bit frog-like in posture, it can run rather quickly, and the large red fins on nearly every part of the body seem more decorative than functional, perhaps aiding the king in attracting a mate or communicating non-verbally. The face of the king is really cool because it's actually a very close copy of a prehistoric armored fish called Dunkleosteus, whose bony head looks extremely menacing. Seriously, I love this. According to the king's designer, they have both gills, which we can see on the side of the neck, and lungs, which allow them to be effective in and out of the water, and their clawed, webbed feet also help in both environments. Mirelurk queens are interesting for many reasons. They have a very nasty acid spit attack that will coat an entire area and melt you to a puddle, and they can shoot Mirelurk eggs straight out of their butt when feeling threatened. We can now confidently say that at least in the Commonwealth area, Mirelurk queens are the egg layers, although this does raise some questions about how she could possibly have laid eggs in some places that she would definitely not fit in, like the interior of the castle. It would not be surprising that Mirelurks, similar to ants or bees, would have workers that would take the eggs and care for them until they hatch, while the queens just did their things pumping out the new generations. Mirelurk queens look somewhat similar to the base Mirelurks, like if you squint and turn your head a little, with the large protective shell on top, 8 crab-like legs that it walks around on, and 2 long and skinny pincer arms. Although there is no surefire match with any real-world crabs, the Mirelurk queen could be related to something like a spiny spider crab, or even maybe a king crab due to the large, spiky shells, long legs, and more slender claws. The eggs that are laid by the queen are laid or organized into small clusters in a muddy nest area, where bits of fresh and old food can be found, namely bones of animals and humans, and even little fish. However, if an intruder gets too close, some of the hatchlings can sense this potential danger and will start to struggle in their eggs, producing a visible wiggle. Wait long enough and the hatchlings will burst out to attack the intruder, or if the eggs are broken, the hatchlings will thank you for your help and immediately try to eat you. Although they can be dispatched with ease, usually just a quick pistol whip is enough to kill them. Although I have to ask, how damn big were the hatchlings that came out of an egg this big? Mirelurk spawn and hatchlings are easy enough to deal with, but the Mirelurks that are hidden beneath the surface nearby are not. All Mirelurk types have the ability to rest buried in the ground, and upon sensing an intruder, will burst out of the ground in dramatic fashion. This stands true for the biggest of all the variants, the Mirelurk Queen, which is truly impressive, although she will generally wait until all of her underlings are killed before bothering to get up and start whooping ass. What is interesting about this behavior is that in the Fallout 3 concept art, something similar was shown where we see a Mirelurk crouched down low against the ground, and upon encountering an enemy, they would spring up in an ambush. Triggering VATS will reveal these hidden Mirelurks, although very often the only exposed part of their bodies are their protective shell, which does not make for a great target. All hidden Mirelurks, including the Mirelurk Queen, can be coaxed out of hiding by an explosive if you don't feel like running up and getting surprised. The introduction of Mirelurk hatchlings I think goes a long way in explaining why and how Mirelurks can be found in seemingly sealed or isolated areas like Vault 88, if Mirelurk hatchlings are small enough to work their way through small pipes and passages. With how widely loved Mirelurk meat was in the Capital Wasteland, it comes as a mild surprise then that far fewer people ever say a word about Mirelurk meat in the Commonwealth. And of those few that do, it's not very positive. Among the random chat that one can hear amongst the settlers, one remark can be heard that eating Mirelurk meat is like chewing on vulcanized rubber. Indeed, there's only one real attempt at farming Mirelurks. At Thicket Excavations, a raider will get your help to pump water out of an old quarry, which he then turns into a raider stronghold where they farm Mirelurks at the bottom. This location is usually the first place Mirelurks are encountered due to how close the quarry is to the starting area. It's also interesting to note that lurks from this quarry are considered better tasting than anywhere else, probably because of the pure, non-salty water. This Mirelurk meat is shown in-game as being in a can, and different kinds will be dropped by certain variants. Normal Mirelurk meat heals for a good amount, 35 hit points, but has 10 rads, a much higher rad count than any Mirelurk meat so far. It can also be used in at least 4 different recipes like Mirelurk cake, roasted meat, Vim Captain's Blend, and Mirelurk jerky, all contributing much more HP and with different effects like breathing underwater or making Mirelurks less aggressive towards you. Softshell meat is even more healthy but also more radioactive and can be cooked to double the HP recovery. Queen Mirelurk meat can be turned into a decorative mount or consumed for 100 HP recovery and 25 rads. Cooking it into a steak doubles all the benefits, including +2 to endurance, but understandably this meat can only be found on Queen Mirelurks. Although we have yet to mention them yet, Nukalurks are back, baby, with the Nuka World DLC, and their meat glows blue, of course, and can recover 45 HP and somehow only 10 rads, with the Nukalurk Queen being the only source of Nukalurk Queen meat. Restoring 120 HP for 30 rads and adding 2 to endurance, the 5 pieces you can get off of her are the only 5 pieces in the whole game, and they can be cooked to produce grilled meat, which doubles all the bonuses. Once all the Nukalurk meat is gone though, it is gone for good, just like in Fallout 3 because they don't respawn. Likewise, the eggs, which are very conventional looking, can heal for 9 HP, but are quite radioactive at 12 rads. They are best used as an ingredient in a number of recipes like Mirelurk cake, Mirelurk egg omelet, Slocum's Buzz Bites, and Yum Yum deviled eggs, all of which provide substantially more benefit than just a raw egg. Eggs are also interesting because Mirelurks seem to seek out eggs and protect them. In order to catch Mirelurks with creature traps, a Mirelurk egg is needed to draw a Mirelurk into the trap. Also nearby the Electrical Hobbyist Club, in a nearby crypt, someone has made some sort of offering consisting of a book, a bone, some other items, and one lone Mirelurk egg. This odd setup will keep you off your guard as you look at it, and a Mirelurk king sneaks up from behind you to attack. Not entering the crypt or finding the top of the king just poking out of the ground nearby and taking the fight to him are the only 2 ways to not get ambushed. A great experiment, if we want to call it that, was conducted by someone who just really loved Mirelurks. Rory Rigwell was a man on a mission, and that mission was to show that Mirelurks were not inherently violent, but rather just misunderstood. He occupied the Irish Pride shipyard and started his own little colony from a group of orphaned hatchlings, as he called them. He was confident that if he raised them and showed them kindness, compassion, and positivity, that they would not have the urge to harm him. He even went so far as to rig up a speaker system that played a number of pre-recorded positive messages on loop like, "A calm Murky is a happy Murky," or "Only meanies eat meat, my little Murkies." If he wasn't feeding them meat, we can't be sure exactly what he was actually feeding them then, and as they grew bigger, he had to resort to throwing the food farther away from him to keep them from pinching him during feeding time. Rory was disappointed and horrified one day when some raiders broke into the facility to poke around, and the Mirelurks had a field day, killing and ripping the raiders to shreds. Unfortunately, Rory would become a Mirelurk snack himself, as his body can be found down near the Mirelurk nests, not far from his supply stash that he had put near the nests in order to keep safe. Or alternatively, he tripped and drowned in a puddle. This guy wasn't the brightest lad in the Commonwealth after all. Rory is a very obvious reference to a real-world man named Timothy Treadwell. Get it? Rory Rigwell, Timothy Treadwell, who made a name for himself by moving to Alaska to live amongst the bears. Both Rory and Timothy both had long blonde hair, they spoke in a similar manner, and both were killed by the creatures they loved and tried to live amongst. Bringing the companion Curie to this location will have her remark, "Domestication of Mirelurks may be impossible," which I tend to agree with. Fallout 4 confirms one interesting aspect of Mirelurks we saw in Fallout 3, their sensitivity to sound. An island off the coast of Boston known as Spectacle Island had a successful farming settlement there where the folks had somehow figured out that broadcasting certain sound frequencies kept the Mirelurks at bay. One unfortunate day, a raider attack caused the sound system to go down, and everyone was overrun by dozens upon dozens of Mirelurks who made short work of anyone remaining on the island. Reactivating the generator and sound system will cause all Mirelurks nearby to flee, running as far as they can to the edges of the water. Even the Mirelurk queen herself that emerges during the activation process is completely run off. The Mirelurks will not be aggressive at all. Attacking them will make them run, and standing next to them and jumping on them will not lead them to attack. The only variants that is apparently not affected by the sound are the hatchlings that are as tenacious and annoying as ever. They're so annoying. This susceptibility to sound really should lead to some sonic weaponry on the East Coast to help fight against Mirelurks, and it is strange that this very effective way to kill or drive off lurks hasn't caught on anywhere else. It's also interesting to note that, more so in Fallout 4 than anywhere else, we see sudden Mirelurk swarms that can wipe out entire communities like at Spectacle Island and the former community in Salem. While we suspected Mirelurks and Fallout 3 could be separate species that work together, and I think most evidence points to that, Fallout 4 seems to confirm that. The variants all look so radically different, and we know hunters are descended from lobsters, while kings are more distinct than ever in their looks, behavior, coloration, and they still have red blood, which contrasts with the green blood from the rest of the Mirelurks. If I were to guess, the bog standard Mirelurk is kind of like the worker in a bee or ant colony. The queen's primary job is to lay eggs and ensure there are new generations. Hunters have very high perception and a ranged attack, meaning that they are like the sentries or guardians, or perhaps even the hunters that gets food for the colony, and the kings may keep the social order and prevent internal fighting. Another notable change for all Mirelurk types between Fallout 3 and 4 is that none of the Fallout 4 variants can swim. When in water, they sink to the bottom and run just as they do on land, even the Mirelurk king with its webbed feet and hands. It is really janky though. Often as they walk, they get stuck on some sort of invisible plane and can't go any further up or down. It is funny that not only can none of them swim, but that it's also really buggy when they're in the water, because Fallout 4, more than any other Fallout game, gave us more water to explore and perks to make swimming and exploring easier. The Mirelurks can attack just as they do on dry land, except none of the ranged attacks will work, so no acid or sonic pulses. Not only did we get new kinds of Mirelurks, but each kind has several variants, making for a dizzying number of Mirelurk variants. Starting at the most useless, Mirelurk hatchlings and spawn are identical stat-wise, exceptionally weak and killable, with a single strike of any weapon. They're more annoying than anything, and I would just ignore them if they didn't chase me down and attack me for the mere sin of existing. The weakest of the conventional Mirelurks is the soft shell Mirelurk, distinguishable from a distance because of its unique green-yellow shade. The most interesting aspects of these Mirelurks are that their perception is quite poor, only at 3 for the soft shell, and all Mirelurks are completely immune to radiation. A very interesting mutation that is shared by the likes of super mutants and ghouls. While their overall perception is pretty low, their sense of smell is quite keen, as we see in Fallout 4 during the Captain's Dance. Throwing some uncooked meat into the water will draw out Mirelurks in a matter of seconds, sometimes faster than that, even if we're using Mirelurk meat. Just like in Fallout 3, they are smart enough to tuck their faces and their soft underbelly down as they charge, making it harder to target their vulnerable soft spots. Normal Mirelurks are a smidge stronger in nearly every respect and are brown, making them blend in more easily with the environment. Mirelurk razor claws are a similar jump and show a trend that will carry forward, with a slight weakness to energy weapons compared to conventional weapons. Razor claws also have vegetation covering their carapace, which helps them blend in, especially when they're buried in the ground. Kill claws are another step up and bizarrely still only have 3 perception, but are entirely black or dark gray, which looks pretty cool. The next most powerful is my favorite, the glowing Mirelurk. The entire Mirelurk is green, but only the soft parts will glow, especially their eyes. They will deal a bit of radiation damage in addition to their already impressive melee damage. Blood Rage Mirelurks were introduced with the Far Harbor DLC and look a good deal different. They get a bump in every stat, even increasing perception, finally, by 2, and are very distinct because of the extra ridges and spikes on the carapace, their red eyes, red soft parts, and red gill-like features that drape off of their shell. There is one unique blood rage Mirelurk that has become a legend among the people of Far Harbor and Fallout fans alike. Red Death is the name of this blood rage Mirelurk, whose bright eyes are said to pierce Adam's holy fog, enticing ship captains to approach, where they run aground on the rocky island that Red Death calls home. One resident of Far Harbor, the Mariner, is an intelligent, rough, and hard-working woman who wishes to protect her little wharf and all the people that live there, but eventually she wishes to do something even greater. She asks for our help to find and kill the legendary Red Death. Boarding our boat and sailing to Red Death Island, you and the Mariner get to lay eyes on the beast that has claimed countless lives and wrecked so many ships, the Red Death itself. Just one problem though, the Red Death is tiny. At a quarter the height of a normal Mirelurk, the Red Death is absolutely pathetic. Although it's kinda cute, the only impressive things are the eyes that shine like spotlights, illuminating everything it looks at. It is interesting to think that although the Red Death is tiny and not really a threat to anyone, this mutation that makes its eyes so bright could be extra advantageous. It basically has food come to it as captains crash their ships into the island attracted to the light. I always feel bad killing it, but we have to in order to advance the quest, and I thought we could mourn the loss by having a respectful rave. The Mariner won't know what to tell the people of Far Harbor. Admitting to the truth will cause them to heckle the poor woman, but lying and embellishing both the Red Death and the quest to kill it is also dishonest. The third option is once again to lie, but it's a more subtle one. Just tell everyone that the trip was unsuccessful and the Red Death is still out there. The most challenging of all the Mirelurk variants, other than the Red Death of course, are the Nuka-Lurks from the bottling plant at Nuka World. Just like in Fallout 3, Mirelurks set up shop at a Nuka-Cola facility and lived, consumed, and reproduced among the Nuka-Cola Quantum River, imbuing them with a bright blue glow just like the drink. These Nuka-Lurks also don't respawn once killed, just like in Fallout 3, but we have to ask ourselves, do Mirelurks have a weird attraction for Nuka-Cola Quantum? This is the second time that they have set up shop somewhere with unlimited access to Quantum. Mirelurks, much like in Fallout 3, are best fought from a distance, targeting their soft bits. They can be slowed dramatically by crippling their legs, making landmines very effective, and if both legs are crippled, they will be completely immobile. Be aware though, although their legs may be crippled, they will still lash out and attack if you get too close. A Mirelurk's carapace can be blown off to bits or completely detached, usually with the use of explosives or explosive rounds. This doesn't always kill the Mirelurk, although it often does, and they can limp along without their giant protective shell, but are incredibly weakened and easy to finish off in this sad state. They are also shockingly small when their giant shell is detached, showing how much of their bulk is comprised of that hard carapace. Interestingly, we learn that the only material that can stand up to the Mirelurk Queen acid spray are Mirelurk carapaces, as we can go on a quest to collect several to bolster Far Harbor's protective wall against a potential Mirelurk Queen attack. Mirelurk hunters are the yin to the Mirelurk yang. While they are rarer and only show up after level 24, they have copious amounts of health, less damage resistance, and strong melee attacks. What makes them unique, however, is that they are quick. They have very high perception at 9 and even have a ranged spitting attack. This makes them priority targets since they can be a threat at nearly any distance, and they will alert all the nearby Mirelurks to your presence, where they will all swarm and attack. Albino Mirelurk hunters are a cool rainbowy iridescent color, and although they can have less overall health, they are more damaging than base Mirelurk hunters. Glowing Mirelurk hunters glow, of course, deal extra radiation damage, and have the most health of any of the hunter variants. Although the Nuka-Lurk hunters can scale to have higher health and always hit much harder than any other type, making it the most dangerous of all the Mirelurk hunters. Mirelurk Kings are the most lethal of the non-gigantic Mirelurk variants, although they have some pronounced weaknesses. The basic King has pretty good perception and less HP than a Mirelurk hunter and a Mirelurk Killclaw, but has strong melee damage, as well as its sonic pulse attack that hits hard and has a high chance of crippling a target's head. The kings are fast and agile, quickly bearing down on a target while firing blasts of sound, but they are far from invincible. Unlike Mirelurk kings, which have a slight weakness towards energy weapons, and Mirelurk hunters, which had no difference between its normal damage and energy damage resistances, Mirelurk kings are much weaker against conventional damage, so much so that its energy resistance is more than double its conventional damage resistance. All Mirelurk kings also have the ability, although it's rarely demonstrated, to go completely invisible, like they are using a stealth boy, although this effect typically lasts only a few seconds. The Deep King variant has green and blue coloration, which makes it seem more aquatic, and that coupled with the name Deep King makes me wonder if these spend more time in the water, particularly the depths. It is also a good deal stronger than the base King. Glowing Mirelurk kings, like all the other glowing varieties, deal extra radiation damage and glow an awesome green. It also has these long tendrils that glow at the end that remind me of the anglers in Far Harbor, and although they can spawn with as low as 245 HP, they scale with the player level and do over 100 melee damage. However, the undisputed champion of the king variants is the Nukalurk, and it's the only Nuka variant that doesn't glow actually. It has the highest perception, health, melee, and sonic blast of any of the kings. Mirelurk queens are, to the surprise of no one, hands down the most difficult of all the Mirelurk types to encounter in combat. Taller than even a super mutant behemoth, her melee attacks are devastating and her acid attack is hard to dodge with its insane range and wide distribution. Apparently, a Mirelurk queen is strong enough to break down the large stones of the castle, a scar the building still bears. Mirelurk queens have the highest perception of any variant at 10, has 1000 HP, and is weaker to conventional damage than to energy weapons, while being immune to both radiation and poison. Her melee attack is devastating at 275, as is the acid attack. The only thing stronger than a Mirelurk queen is, of course, the Nukalurk queen, with her glowing blue flesh pulsating while she lurks around the pond just outside of the bottling plant. She has 50% more HP and more melee and spit damage, making for the most challenging Mirelurk fight in the entire game. Fallout 4 also gives us a few extra ways to help fight Mirelurks, an astoundingly awesome Tales magazine that boosts damage against them, and an Islander's Almanac in Far Harbor that protects against some Mirelurk damage, and also a special outfit called The Legend of the Harbor from the Red Death quest that blocks Mirelurk and bug damage by 15%. To one of my favorite parts now, the inspiration behind Fallout 4's Mirelurk designs. The new Mirelurk design that we saw a hint of in Fallout 3's concept art seems to have been inspired by creatures in the Dark Crystal movie called Garthim, although the creature designer, Jonah Loeb, at first said he wasn't sure if this creature was the design inspiration. After some more explanation, said that they definitely were an inspiration, which makes sense given the way they look and move. Mirelurk hunters, as stated before, were based on lobsters, which the designers thought was important given where the game takes place. There are some concept designs of hunters that show them upright and bipedal, almost shrimp-like though. Mirelurk kings don't have a straight inspiration, although Jonah Loeb once again described his ideas behind the design, calling it a Lovecraftian monstrosity. He gave it a crown, which is subtle but visible at the top of the head, and I like that, and the numerous fins along each limb, the back and tail, were meant to represent red sweeping robes like that of a king. The original concept of the Mirelurk king was closer to Fallout 3. It was tall, bipedal, and very strong, although the end result ended up being far more animalistic. The Mirelurk queen had several different potential designs, one of which ended up being used for the fog crawler introduced in Far Harbor, and one that looks more appropriate for Guardians of the Galaxy or something. The Mirelurk queen doesn't seem to have a direct inspiration, but the art of Fallout mentions that the Mirelurk queen was a late addition to the game, but I for one am glad that it made the cut. This brings us to the most recent installment in the Fallout franchise, which ironically is also the earliest game in the Fallout series. Mirelurks are present and very prevalent in the Appalachian region only 25 years after the Great War, and we have all the types from Fallout 4, plus even more variants. A few intrepid survivors of the Great War, who were part of the anarchist anti-government movement known as the Free States, took a special interest in these giant new creatures. Through observation, they confirmed that Mirelurks are social amongst themselves, but incredibly aggressive towards everything else. Their eyesight is quite poor, which we knew from their perception stats, and they rely mostly on their sense of smell, which again, that makes sense both in-universe, when Mirelurks could be coaxed out of hiding with raw meat, and in the real world, as crustaceans predominantly rely on their sense of smell to find food. Their large claws are primarily used for hunting, and the stout shell on their back means that most of the megafauna of Appalachia generally leave them alone. What the researcher found most interesting is that apparently Mirelurks grow exceptionally fast, and they thought that Mirelurks could potentially be a good source of farmed food because of this. Alas, the researcher met his end when he had resolved to try and steal some of the eggs for study, becoming Mirelurk food, and his body sits amongst others, stripped largely of their muscles nearby. Mirelurk eggs and meat are similar to Fallout 4 in their nutritional value, and they can be used in a pretty incredible number of recipes. Everything from Mirelurk cake, omelets, aged steak, corn pone, cranberger, mud cookies, and pumpkin pies. Mirelurk eggs seem to be a good substitute for chicken eggs in many recipes. Both eggs and meat have a decent chance of causing disease when eaten raw, but are worth holding on to for use in the right recipes. Mirelurks are a tameable creature in 76, allowing a friendly one to live at and guard your camp, although we shouldn't necessarily use this as confirmation that they can actually be tamed, since most creatures can become camp pets. There are a truly insane number of variants in Fallout 76. In addition to everything we see in Fallout 4, there are stout shells, strangler, venomous, hard shell, vorpaclaw, steel shell, deadly, and scorched. Since there are no horseshoe crabs so far inland, it's not clear how or why Mirelurks can be found here so early in the timeline. It would have required a pretty aggressive migration from areas that did have high crab populations that could have mutated if Mirelurks have a natural source. Mirelurk hunters make a bit more sense since crayfish are native to West Virginia, and we get grim hunters, relentless, bloodthirsty, deadly, and scorched, on top of what we had in Fallout 4. Mirelurk kings can also be found as savage variants, High King, Deadly, and Scorched. Mirelurk queens are also present and can be found as glowing variants, Prime, Scorched, and Strangler, which make an already difficult enemy just that much worse. It is hard to say why all these types of Mirelurks are found in this region so close to the Great War, although their heavy presence in Vault 94 may provide a hint. Vault 94 has a very interesting story, but the part that is relevant to us is that they had a Garden of Eden creation kit, or GECK, that was destroyed by violent intruders, causing it to erupt in an extremely radioactive and destructive explosion that caused incredible mutations to occur in the flora and fauna. The abundance of Mirelurks in Vault 94 could hint that Mirelurks, at least in this region, owe their existence to this incredibly potent mutation event. Although again, it isn't clear where the original specimens that would have potentially undergone rapid, unscheduled mutation would have come from, since Vault 94 did not do any scientific research in the realm of the natural sciences. I would be interested to hear your in-universe theories and ideas about why we see the Mirelurks that we do in Appalachia so close to the time of the Great War. There is still one interesting point to bring up, not from any of the games, but rather the new Fallout TV show. Although Mirelurks are never shown or spoken of in the background scenes where the main character Lucy finds herself on level 12 of Vault 4, we see a diagram of a Mirelurk king. Vault 4 was a vault led by scientists who began researching how to splice human and animal DNA in order to make humans more resistant to radiation. The presence of a Fallout 3 Mirelurk King drawing indicates that their research led them to discover this mutational possibility, either through reproducing it through experimentation or possibly only in theory. We can't be sure, but this would seem to indicate more than anything that the Fallout 3 Mirelurk Kings or heck, these could be the New Vegas lake lurks since they look identical, are mutated humans, or at least have some human DNA. Otherwise, it wouldn't make any sense why it would be in Vault 4 since that was their entire scientific purpose. The implications here are interesting. And that, my dear rad friends, is all the lore, speculation, and background information that I could muster from Mirelurks, and I have to say that this ended up much longer than I anticipated. If you get any value from what I do, consider helping any way you can. And if you are really feeling generous, you can help build Adam's Kingdom by becoming a patron or YouTube member like these fine folks you see here. They are currently submitting ideas for the next supporter video, and will be voting on the ideas in not too long. So if that sounds up your alley, join Adam's army. Special welcome to new member, Maxwell Dojo, and a big thank you to all those that have rejoined recently. Of course, I need to do a special shout out to the top tier All to Adam patrons, Acrid B, Gardner Minshew Simp, Dominic White, Tapey Papey, Juan Vader, The Breadman, Tyler Eaton, Owen Balzer, and 94, Tessa Storm, The Love Mummy, Shallow Fire 13, Phantom Inc., Tatoranus, Ace Jacobs, and Cheesy Presto. Adam is pleased. Take care of yourselves. You are Adam's children after all. And I will see you soon.